So we're going to talk about how to publish fanfiction, which is a very dangerous conversation, I'm informed. Now, normally I run this panel with Chocolate Pony, but he's not here. He decided that he wanted to be with his family for Christmas, and I completely understand and respect that decision. He also wrote half of this panel, if not more of it. Which means I'm now going to run it from his side and my side with my interpretation of his notes. Fun times. But in all seriousness, I love him to death, and the amount of research he poured into this to make this possible is mind-boggling. It makes me look like a slacker. So, basic introduction and premise of everything you need to understand. One, if you should choose to publish your fanfiction, is what I'm going to go over. I'm going to tell you up front, you are not going to make any money. Sorry. You do this because you want to, because you're passionate about it, not because you want to make money. It is going to cause you so much time, stress, and actual money that you're going to start wondering if it's worth it. It is, but it is really, really taxing. Like, if I could not do that, I could not write these books and have a full-time job taxing. It just wouldn't happen. Or it would take 5 extra years to get 3 books. And you need to have a reason for doing this. Like a personal reason, not an outside reason. A reason that you can point to and go, that's why. My reasoning is simple, because it should be done. Simply put, I was like, fine, I'm doing this. And if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it all the way. I'm not going to stop. If someone tells me to stop, I'm going to fight them tooth and nail until I can't fight them anymore, or they give up. They gave up. And we're going to talk about that, eventually. So, little historical side notes. If any of you have ever seen any or read any of these works, they're all the same thing. You can interpose the characters and the creatures, and the situations are mostly the same. One of these is the Odyssey. One of these is the Journey to the West. One of these is the story of Beowulf. And one of these is Don Quixote. They're all stories of heroes. They all follow the same path, the same journey, and the same epic long tale. And through certain interpretations, you realize that the Odyssey made its way to China, and in the form of the Journey to the West, made its way back. And then it made its way north, and somebody was inspired to make Beowulf. We've been making derivative things for thousands of years. But all of them become unique stories once the writer creates its own interpretation. And through that, you learn about the anxiety of an influence. To explain this, when you have people who are strong writers and strong creatives, they will create strong misinterpretations and misreadings of works which can become their own unique source material. A great example of this is people like Jules Verne and Frank Herbert are from the same camp. They read the same books. They created totally different worlds. But you also have people who have weak interpretations. An example of this are the followers of Confucius. Every one of them, just about, out of 998 different interpretations of Confucius's writing, there's only 3 that are distinct. Think about that. 998 people don't need to write down what they heard Confucius say, and only 3 of them are distinct. The rest of them are regurgitations. That's what a weak poet or a weak writer is. They simply repeat ideas without creating anything new. They don't understand how to take what their predecessors did and create something new out of it. Effectively meaning that conservatism in writing and conservatism with IPs is a fundamental dead end for creativity. Not to get too political, but look at how many reboots Hollywood's doing right now, because everything's so heavily IP locked. And then you have, your own headcanons. So, allow me to explain this. In Macbeth, Macbeth says, "No man can kill me." J.R.R. Tolkien interpreted that to mean a woman could. How does Macbeth die? He dies over a woman. So, 200 years later, you get Lord of the Rings, and you get this famous line from Return of the King that's not even in the book! Where she takes off her helmet, goes, "I am no man," and then kills the Witch King, who can't be slain by any man. A strong misinterpretation created that scene. So, why is fanfiction important? What is it that makes it important? Here you have a series of pieces of fanfiction and the spin-offs that lead into all of modern sci-fi. Because before the 1600s, the only form of fictional novelization we had was romance. We either had tales of heroes who romantically get the girl, we had tales of star-crossed lovers, we had Romeo and Juliet, we had all of these different tales that were just romance. And then somebody said, well, what if the romance was horrifying? That's where you get the fairy tale Beauty and the Beast, which is now a modern Disney movie. And then we get Jules Verne, who just went off the deep end and said, what if there's no romance at all and it's all about the situation? And that leads into all new forms of horror. You have H.P. Lovecraft and the Mountains of Madness, which is an interpretation of Jules Verne's Journey to the North Pole. And then an interpretation of Mountains of Madness becomes Nemo. Every one of these is an interpretation of each other. A slow cycle of reading, reinterpreting, misreading, misinterpreting, creating your own thing. Over and over again. An inspiration, if you will, that leads to the next piece. You already see how derivative comics are? Who's this? Anybody? That's Gilgamesh. That's Hercules. That's Strongman, who's literally a guy who was a Hollywood actor who would do things like catch safes for stunts. Keeps going, keeps going, keeps going. Then we get into Marvel. And Marvel Man gets interpreted back to Superman. They're all interpretations of each other. They're all looking at something that was already created and reimagining it. When you ask authors who their inspirations are, and they start listing those inspirations, you can then take those inspirational works and see it in theirs. And you can cycle it back. We've been doing fan fiction for centuries. Why is this suddenly a problem now? Well, it started with Tijuana Bibles, where people would take and make their own comic books out of the Philippines, Tijuana, in Canada, or Cuba, or anywhere where there was an overseas U.S. military base. They'd make their own comics and sell them. And you end up with comics of Orphan Annie, and Whippy from Popeye, and Spock is the main character instead of Kirk. And then you end up with it being taken to whole new levels, such as, this is straight up a hentai.
Oh, what?
and adult anime. And this is, well, this is copyright questionable because this is Pokemon but with ponies. And all that goes back to the court case from 1971. So air pirates took the images of Mickey and Minnie Mouse and put them into horrible, horrible situations where they're doing things like smuggling drugs, holding up trains, committing bank robberies, and actually murdering people. And Disney decided that wasn't okay. And they took Air Pirates to court. And it was ruled that you could confuse the brand because the images were too similar. And then we get what's called the Mickey Mouse Protection Act. Because every time that Mickey Mouse is about to go into public domain, this happens. Every single time. So in 1790, it was determined that 30 years was about how long you could hold a copyright. Then it was determined life of the author, or 70 years. Then it was redetermined, and redetermined, and now we're pretty sure Mickey Mouse will be held out of public domain until Disney doesn't have any money. This is ridiculous. Walt Disney has been dead for more than 50 years, and Mickey Mouse is still not in public domain. Some of the things that Disney created out of public domain, such as Robin Hood, Beauty and the Beast, The Witch's Cauldron, The Fox and the Hound is a fable that they turned into a movie. Those things, they've tried to pull back out of public domain by saying they own them. It hasn't worked yet, but they've tried. Where does this leave us? This leaves us trying to figure out where fan fiction now falls. Because some people want to keep it gray, because they don't want that fight. But if we have that fight, we win that fight. That's weird to say, but that's the truth. Modern fan fiction. We have the Mary Sue trope that exists. Fanfiction.net. Nobody's saying they don't have a right to exist. J.K. Rowling said Harry Potter doesn't have the right to have fanfictions. It's unenforceable, but she tries to enforce it anyway. She spends millions of dollars every year trying to enforce and take down Harry Potter websites. By the way, 50 Shades of Grey is a fanfiction. It's actually based on a story where a 1920s woman willingly submits herself for money from a rich billionaire to do with as he pleases in exchange for unlimited funds, and it's reinterpreted as a fanfiction. It's still terrible. It's still the worst form of consent possible, but you can hear about that from Foley later. That's not my department this time. And then we get into things where you take them to court. And this is what they're actually scared to death of. Harmony Gold lost their license to Macross because Harebrained Schemes and Microsoft took them to court and won a court case about Battletech. Battletech is a mech-based game that licensed some figures from Harmony Gold's Macross back in the 80s, and Macross was trying to prevent them from being able to use those figures for 3 decades. Harmony Gold lost their court case. You know why they lost their court case? Quote, character outlines and designs are non-copyrightable. The characterization of a character is copyrightable. Mechs cannot have characterization. End quote. That's what the judge said. Guess what I did with that? I took Hasbro to court. They didn't come for me, I came for them. I walked up to them, I said, here's my copyright, prove it wrong, here's the court case, see you there. 4th District Court, Richmond, Virginia. 6 months. Well, 5, almost 6 months. It cost me $7,000 in court fees. That's where I ended up having to pay my lawyer fees. Bethesda didn't show up because Fallout 76 was on fire and they were having to deal with all those lawsuits. So they're just kind of quietly slipped under the rug for Bethesda. Bethesda has until February to appeal at this point. Hasbro, after 5 months of back and forth, realized that they were losing and decided to cut a deal. It's a very simple deal. They don't C&D anyone, period, for anything similar. And I agree not to do anything beyond this one book series. And they pay all my lawyer fees, which at that point was something like $17,000. Like, that would have bankrupted me alone. I argued that Fallout Equestria as a concept is a parody of taking the My Little Pony friendship values, loyalty, magic, generosity, kindness, honesty, to their logical extremes, but where you decide that your friends are more important than the actual interpretation of the world around you, and are given the power to change it. I also argued that I was basing things off of Fallout 4. And the first thing I said about Fallout 4 was, and I quote, "You don't play the mom or dad, dumbass. You play the kid. The mother and the father story is basically written. The kid's isn't. You play the kid and see what happens." That would have made a more interesting story. But they didn't do that. And then it was determined that I had failed at proving that I was parodying Fallout 4, that I was actually parodying Fallout 3 and Fallout 2. So I failed and won at the same time. So that court case is R. Miller v. Hasbro Incorporated and ZeniMax Incorporated, ZeniMax being the owners of Bethesda Entertainment at the time. Now Microsoft owns them. And if anyone, who here is keeping up with Games Workshop's stupidity with copyright? Anybody?
I've heard of it.
Okay. The guy who's now in control of Games Workshop's IP protection was the guy at my court case for Hasbro. Hasbro fired him. Games Workshop hired him, and now he's cracking down on everything fan-related, whether it be fan fiction or fan animation, doesn't matter, he's cracking down on it. So hard, it's actually unenforceable. And I'm like, you're overcompensating here, friend. And if any one of them decide to fight back, you will lose, and I will laugh. But yeah, he's the guy who started stuff by saying they could copyright the term Space Marine and Orc. Same guy. So I'm like, this might be partially my fault, but I'm not the one making the call here. This is entirely his decisions. So yeah, and now I have a third book, and I finally get to this part. And I close the third book, and I said, I did a thing! My court case lasted from October 11th through February 7th. I could not, now this is the important thing about court cases you have to understand. You cannot even acknowledge publicly you were in a lawsuit. Because anything you say outside of the court might damage your standing within the court. You can acknowledge you've been sued. You cannot acknowledge it. Like you see it all the time when people come out of the courthouse, all the press rush up to them and they don't say anything. Because they know anything they say outside that court in that moment might make it where they can't use some of their evidence or some of their arguments in court. Because the judge might rule it's compromised evidence. Because if the news media gets a hold of something, they'll reinterpret it 150 times. So you can't even acknowledge it. This is not fun. You lose at least one day every week to just going to court and sitting there. Sometimes you get to talk, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you just have to sit there and take abuse, and other times you have to sit there and deliver abuse, and you don't even like delivering it. A copyright interpretation, by the way, is not done by jury. It's done by a judge, 3 copyright attorneys, your attorney, and their attorney. You have to sit in the courtroom, and 99% of the time you're not even allowed to speak. Except to your attorney in hushed whispers. And the ruling comes from the judge and 2 of those attorneys. The judge effectively gets 2 votes on a 4-person council, which means that the judge voted twice, and then 2 of those attorneys, the attorneys each vote once. And it gets interpreted out of 5. And if you lose, there's no appeal. It's all or nothing. This is important to know. You need to make sure you have a strong case and you are willing to fight it out. Because if you lose or you withdraw, you don't get a second shot. Because if you withdraw, the company in question will come after you and shut you down until until either you're out of money or they actually get a ruling against you. If you win, on the other hand, which comes from, first off, pick your court carefully. A lot of copyright cases are heard in Texas because companies basically bribe a couple small towns in Texas that have federal district courts and then try to sue you there. That's why we picked Virginia. Virginia has a long history of their courts ruling against big companies, particularly when it comes to IP. Pick your judge. It's almost like an interview process. You have to look at what your judges previously ruled on and why they ruled that way, and try to interpret how they will rule what you're going to present before them. And you need to be the aggressor. This is important because not only do you only get one shot, but if you withdraw and they don't pursue to punish you, it's left gray still. So if you decide you're losing and you withdraw, and they don't actually come after you afterwards, you're back into the gray zone, where a lot of fan fiction is now. You don't have to keep fighting. You can eventually say, all right, fine, I'm going to withdraw my charges. And unless they are willing to pursue those charges past that point, you go back to gray. Hire a lawyer who's going to cross-examine you. It's not just the lawyer who's going to present your evidence, but the lawyer who is willing to sit down and turn you into a pile of mush to get you ready. Because the 3 lawyers on that council are going to all get to cross-examine you without restraint. The only thing he can do is file objections when they're violating court procedure. Stuff like leading the witness or purposely trying to piss you off or trying to get an emotional reaction. Otherwise, their questioning is basically uninterrupted. There were days I went home crying because I thought that I had just, had myself socked in the face by a law book. And, oh yeah, it's expensive. Don't ever expect to make money on this. I'm still in the hole. I've sold 1,000+ books. I'm still in the hole. So, yeah, you're probably never going to make money off of this. Ever. Oh, and funny fact, they have armies of people at these companies who call the IRS to have you audited as anonymous tips. I've been audited every year since 2018, without fail. This year, we filed taxes. Auditor showed up to my house, and I looked at him and said, again. All right, let's go. And it's just sitting in there going over every single thing I counted off on taxes and having to explain it, interpret it, having to have all the contracts for my lawyers in triplicate, or for my artists in triplicate, for my editors in triplicate, for all the voice actors we have for the audiobook and animations in triplicate. Just all the paperwork in order and just be like, here. I literally have a quarter of a closet that's just paperwork for audits. Just in case, just for when I get, because I'm expecting it to happen every year. They are not nice about this. They want you to go out of business so they can go back to, saying they own everything. So Hasbro made a deal. They cannot claim against an FOE property, period. And they have agreed for 10 years to not do anything to sites like Derby Guru, Fanfiction.net, or any other fanfiction or fan art hosting website. For 10 years. Bethesda didn't show up. They got ruled against, and they have until February to appeal, February 2022. Because you have 3 years to appeal. That annoys me to no end. That every night I have to be like, am I going to get the letter tomorrow? Am I going to get the letter tomorrow? I mean, I sent a copy of the first book to the desk of Todd Howard with a sticky note on it that says, I wrote a better Fallout with Monies. I then got a cease and desist, do not contact Todd Howard ever again from his lawyer. I wonder if I made him mad.
Todd Howard went up to him and he said, it just works.
It just works.
It just works. So, the MLP was considered transformative because of taking friendships to the logical extremes and advancing technology in the world to the point where they are post on current modern technology with laser rifles and power armor. K-Cat's original work is transformative. Fallout, on the other hand, is turned on its head by removing the PTSD and paranoia that exists inherently in the Fallout universe, and instead replacing it with inherent systems from MLP, such as the elements of harmony, or the value system, or the virtues such as mercy or truth or honesty. By changing it to where the norm should be happiness and rainbows, and it's not. However, it's only considered a parody of Fallout in terms of Fallout 1 through 3. Fallout 4 and 76 are not included in this ruling, because they are considered different games. Now, I want you to imagine this, though. Our judge was 72 years old. And to start the court case, I told him that he had to go play video games and watch My Little Pony Friendship is Magic for 30 episodes. His exact response to this was, "Come again?" So there's a judge out there, a retired judge now, from the state of Virginia, who has watched the first 3 seasons of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic and at least watched a playthrough of all the Fallout games because he had to for work. I don't feel bad about that at all, and I probably should.
Is he retarding his own Fallout and portrait of Fanfiction?
Isn't he your fan now?
Yes, he actually is my fan now. He's bought all 3 books. He read them to his kids as bedtime stories. Yes.
Sorry, I'm still a little confused. They ruled that it was not a parody of Fallout 4, only Fallouts 1 through 3. Can you clarify what the logic there was again?
Fallout 4 is made in such a way where it takes away a lot of the grim darkness and a lot of the horror and just vulnerability elements. Like if you play Fallout 1 through 3 or New Vegas, it doesn't matter if you have power armor. At any time, a Deathclaw can just come out and rip your head off. You're done. There goes your game. Bye. Whereas in Fallout 4 and onward, that's not the case. There comes a certain point in Fallout 4 where you can just stand in front of the Deathclaw and have it maul you for an hour and it doesn't hurt. Or a lot of the other things about Fallout 4 are more cartoony and less serious, or more action-oriented and less horror. Whereas, like, if you play Fallout 1 or Fallout 2, you know every moment is, like, horrifying. And lastly, because we use a system within the book where the character makes conscious decisions that might even be counter to what everyone around them is trying to do, and then pushes those decisions through by either talking it out or force of arms. Whereas in Fallout 4, a lot of the time the quest is preset. You don't get to make a decision. And that's why it was ruled no, Fallout 4 is a different game. And Fallout 76 is because most of the quests don't have a decision. They're audio tapes you pick up and listen to and then go through the motions. So when you're determining if you want to publish something, you need to figure out factors for fair use. The biggest factor is always, is this commercial or nonprofit? Nonprofit is 9 times out of 10 going to be fair use. But you have to have a reason for your nonprofit. It has to be educational, or it has to be documentative, or it has to be something that is clearly for scientific endeavor or historical record keeping. Anyone can write a book about history from World War II and use a bunch of World War II novels and books and historians as citation and write their own version. That's just a for instance. Next is the nature of the copyrighted work itself. What's the audience? Like, as far as your nature, the first thing in your nature is, who's your target audience? Is it going to compete with the target audience of what you're writing from? My Little Pony Friendship is Magic target audience is ages 8 through 12. Fallout, Equestria, and therefore Fallout's target audience is ages 18 plus. Those are not competitive markets. Further, how did you reinterpret the characters? Did you scratch off the serial numbers and just change the names and the looks? Did you directly use the characters but put them in a completely different situation that you can verifiably prove is not something that they would ever be in their original creation? And then it's the amount of work used from the original. Fallout Equestria not only has a bunch of cities and towns that aren't in regular My Little Pony, and it has a bunch of things that aren't in Fallout. Fallout doesn't have magic. You can't levitate a gun and throw it around, or a train car and drop it on an alicorn. So there's there's fantastical elements being pulled in from My Little Pony, and there's grim, gritty realism being pulled in from Fallout, because let's face it, let's take a 200-year-old soldier in power armor who's ghoulified and decapitate him in a single paragraph. And then make the whole audience go, wait, did somebody die? What do you mean he's dead? That doesn't make any sense. My Little Pony, no one dies. Well, officially no one dies. Though, I'm going to have a panel later tonight called Murder in Equestria where I'm going to show you that a bunch of creatures died. And lastly, how does it change the market? Are you going to, not only do you have different age groups, but you have different genres, different categorizations. Are you going to directly pull money out of the original owner's pocket with your with your competition? These are all factors you have to be able to cite and explain and sit down and talk about. So we're going to look over some examples. Not okay. 60 years later, Coming to the Rye is an unauthorized sequel, straight up. It takes all of the characters from Catcher in the Rye and just adjusts it to be 60 years later. It tried to say it was parody, and the judge ruled, no, this is an unauthorized sequel, you're out. Because it did nothing transformative, it didn't change anything, and it tried to retell the same story using the same characters, just 60 years older. Putting a single word on the book cover to make people think it's different does not work. It was determined that they were attempting to sell a parody that's too much like it. It's written in the exact same style as Dr. Seuss, providing similar commentary, and it's about the O.J. Simpson trial.
Wow.
The biggest contributing factor to this not being a parody is the fact that the cat not in the hat has the same rhyme syllables as the cat in the hat. So as you're reading through the book, the rhymes will almost line up exactly, almost like you copied a song and just changed the words. Now for some fun. Gone with the Wind is, if you've never read it, is a tale about the destruction of Southern white heritage at the hands of the North over the course of the Civil War. The Wind Done Gone is the slave's perspective. The original company that owned the Gone with the Wind tried to sue and say that it's an unauthorized retelling. When in fact, because it consciously avoids using the same characters and locations and adds a completely different layer of social commentary, i.e., we're going to tell the end of the Civil War and the end of slavery from the slave's perspective. It was determined to be completely transformative. The only thing they had to do was slap a sticker on it that says the unauthorized parody. Because you have to do that. You have to say that you know, this is not theirs and they do not endorse this. I have 4 pages in here that basically say that. So yeah, the determination in 1994, this is still what we're using. It's been 30 years. This is the baseline determination. At least in part, comments on the author's work, or if the contrary, the commentary has no critical bearing on the substance and styles of the original composition. What does that mean? It means that my piece of work must comment and acknowledge the original work it's from, but have no critical bearing to change, alter, or redo the work that's been done before it. It has to be a new interpretation. though commerciality looms larger, this is the basis. This quote is the basis on if something's legal or not. This is the basis on if something's satire, if something's parody, if something is a new IP, if something is a reinterpreted IP. This one little quote is the entire basis. That's insane. We're still using the 1984 Copyright Act with no updates beyond just extending how long you get to keep a copyright. We're still using that in an era where you can go online and publish something right now. And unless the company that it's based on, you go publish a piece of fan fiction, and unless the company sues you within 4 years, they can't do anything. That's where we live. This is insane. Think about that. You can go publish something online publicly and just make sure that no Hasbro rep saw it for 4 years, then you could publish it. And they couldn't do anything because you could be like, well, it was out online for 4 years, all you do is search a keyword. They have armies of bots sitting in a server room searching keywords to try to find IP violations. And then they have another layer. This isn't even conspiracy. This is on their books. They have 50 lawyer and lawyer secretaries and legal assistants whose sole job is to sit there and see what those bots come up with and then determine if there's some way they can sue you. That's obscene. Which is why you hear about court cases like recently Take-Two Interactive trying to say Take-Two is copyrighted. Take-Two is a description of what you do when you have to do a second take on a directing set for a movie. You cannot say you own those two words. Difference in parody and satire. On the right-hand side, you have something very few people know about called Flex Metallo. It is a parody of the Justice League. It is made to be hilarious. That's why the man on the front cover is wearing underwear and a half-fitting bathrobe while flying through the air. The Watchmen is made to be satire. A lot of you may know The Watchmen because they made a movie about it. Who watches The Watchmen? Who watches the ones with power? Both of these fall under completely different genres. One thing is making fun of superheroes, having fun with it, and absolutely interpreting it the weirdest way possible just for our entertainment. The other one is to tell us be careful who we put faith in. Because you never know who actually the villain is until they reveal themselves. And the original Watchmen is horrifying. She took a dog apart down to its bare components to try to figure out why the president liked it. The dog's dead, by the way. There's no reviving from that. It's dead. And then the atomic guy over here is just like disassembles rifles with his mind and blows up a tank with a ray that he creates in his hand. The original Watchmen comics are horrifying to behold. But here we have the Watchmen taking itself seriously and the Watchmen taking itself to the absurd. This is horrifying to start with, then you start thinking about it and you find it's kind of funny. Of course, that's if you go down a dark rabbit hole like I do. And it keeps going on and on and on. So here you have this incredibly homoerotic version of Superman saving you. And here you have a guy who just likes napalm went far too much because he has Vietnam PTSD and they decided that they should trust him with rescuing people. That's a bad idea, right? Fanfiction without courts is where we are. You do stuff like file off the serial numbers. This is something from Chocolate Pony. You have Horseland. I forget what her name is, but it's not Twilight Sparkle. It's something entirely different, but it's clearly who it's supposed to be. And you file off the serial numbers in very unique and creative ways to make your own story and to transform it. He publishes this comic in physical form. and comic shops sell it on a local level. You can't do fighting as magic because that's their characters, precisely as their characters are interpreted with their characterization. You can 100% do them fighting herds though. Even if, you know, they have the same movesets and same battle systems and mostly the same as everything is fighting as magic at. By the way, Basket has an actual cabinet of fighting as magic. It's the only one in existence, and it tickles me pink to see that. But anyway, this is legal. This is not. But if you had taken this and just changed their names and altered their color schemes a little bit, this would have been legal. And to highlight something from the Watchmen here, so you know it's a Watchmen comic, is the opening scene on the front cover appears in every single panel in some way, all the way to the end. Which is really creative. That's how you know it's an actual Watchmen comic, because the author gave permission to reuse his characters. But because he makes sure that that front cover logo appears in every single panel. You know he's the one who did it. Whereas Pax America tries to do something similar, but you can see the change in the interpretation. The Watchmen is a direct interpretation. You see the smiling face there, then there, and you see it get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and you see the blood stain at the very bottom. You see the smiley face in every panel here. You see the smiley face in those panels. But here, it's a reinterpretation. You'll see the symbol, you'll see the symbology, but you won't see the exact same thing. So, when I say file off the serial numbers, I mean Chaco really files off the serial numbers. That's clearly, that's a Discord analog, but it's his Discord analog. With his brain slightly out, with multiple mouths, with dozens of eyes all over his body. It's his interpretation. And because this is legal, it makes stuff like this legal. It makes stuff like Changeling War legal. It makes stuff like Time Loop legal. Because it is taking those characters, filing the serial numbers off a little bit, reinterpreting it, and then representing it. So you end up with, don't do that. You end up with stuff like this. And this is all fine. By the way, Harry Potter's not original. This is a side note. Wands and Wizards' first mention and interpretation is from the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Hogwarts Express is a Harry, and you know, this looks like Harry Potter. Except for before that, you had a book called Larry Potter about a magical boy who literally goes around casting spells using ancient words and terminology such as Leviosa. The Worst Witch, which has concepts like, I don't know, what's the sport they play?
Quidditch.
Quidditch. That appears in The Worst Witch, verbatim. The Legend of Ra and the Muggles. The Secret of Platform 13. Books of Magic. With an English boy with a legend and a scar. All of these books appeared up to a decade before J.K. Rowling ever released the Sorcerer's Stone. This is something she doesn't want anyone to acknowledge. That her work is just the interpretation of multiple works put together. There we go. Twinkle Sunset. Party Prize. Starlight Strike. Honey Pie. Princess Sparkle. Book Pansy.
Starlight Strike kind of looks like the Chrome Pony.
They're all just reinterpretations of Twilight Sparkle, Pinkie Pie, Rainbow Dash, Applejack, Rarity, and Fluttershy. By the way, We don't hold copyright holders to the same standard that we hold people who create new things to, and it's absolutely ridiculous. You have to like hold them down and beat them over the head for them to relent and say, okay, fine, you're original enough, we lose. They can make photocopies of photocopies for eternity. The reason why Fox makes a new Fantastic Four movie every 6 years is because they want to keep the IP. Because if they stop making stuff with it after 7 years, it goes back to Marvel. And they play it safe and courteous and tight-lipped. There are exceptions. Dune is an exception. The 3 movie versions of Dune are all radically different and tell the story in completely different ways from completely different perspectives to the point that they don't look like they came from the same book. You saw the recent one? That's the book, verbatim. Like, no deviation from the novel. And then if you saw Sci-Fi's version, that's all over the place, deviating from the novel. And if you saw the original 4-hour movie, the reason why the last hour of it's bad is because the studio was so over budget that they just went, okay, you go finish this and don't do any reshoots. That's why the last hour of that is terrible. And they've been making photocopies and photocopies at this point to revamp everything because they're not letting anyone create anything original because they feel like they can stamp it out of existence because they know that's our money. And the creator of Superman died penniless. The actual creator of Spider-Man died in debt that his family still had to pay for. The creator of the X-Men went insane because of the legal battle to get him paid properly, and died in an insane asylum. Copyright protection doesn't protect the creators, it protects the company. It doesn't protect the people who makes it. Don't get that illusion. And copies of copies are always going to be worse. That's what this entire quote boils down to from Alan Moore. A copy of a copy will always be worse and will never be held to the same standards. So remember how I said this wasn't okay and this wasn't okay, but this is? And explain how they were? This is just a short little thing to explain this to you guys. Let's put that to modern interpretations, shall we? Star Trek. That's just retelling the same story, and it's purely fan service. There's nothing original about the difference between the original Star Trek and the reboot. RoboCop, it's been rebooted, just flat out. It tells the exact same story, verbatim, from the get-go. The difference being that instead of the company that betrayed him, it's the police department. That's it. This is transformative. Gen 1 to Gen 4, this is definitely 2 different shows. Entirely. By the way, if you've actually seen some of the Gen 1 and Gen 2 stuff, my God, what were they on and can I have some? Some of that stuff is just off the wall, straight up metal, and like, what? Did you just murder Applejack? I'm confused. Hey, let's look at something totally controversial. The one on the right does not meet the qualifications for transformative at all. It is a retelling of the original A New Hope with new characters, using the old characters as props. This is an actual transformative reinterpretation of Star Wars. This is considered, however, is a bad reinterpretation from a weak poet. That's the problem. It was an attempt to reinterpret Star Wars, but it was done so from the perspective of someone who didn't understand what they were doing. And it shows. Now let's look at some more fun, weak reinterpretations. Hey, my childhood! Oh God, she hates Dalmatians because they killed her mom. That makes no sense.
Yes, it does.
You. I saw this movie.
You want a refund?
What?
Would you like a refund?
Yeah, I want to see Afterlife because I'm actually going to see a private screening. That was good. This is luck. Oh look, the 10th Transformers movie. Because Michael Bay prints money with explosions.
Not wrong.
This was god-awful! This was the destruction of a character and the destruction of multiple sacrifices for no reason. This is a very weak reinterpretation of My Little Pony. This is like non-transformative as hell. I mean, I like Equestria Girls, I'm not against it. But this is definitely a weak interpretation. These? You're kidding, right?
They even do the live action Powerpuff Girls?
They canceled it because the script leaked and everyone was so horribly against it.
I thought they were going to rework it.
Oh look, this formula. Oh look, this formula. Oh look, dear God.
American Dad is better than Family Guy in my opinion. It takes the original concept and makes it a lot better.
But all of this is by the formula.
I'll have you know, I think the Cleveland show is much better.
It doesn't matter which one of these is better or worse. This is all formulaic. All of this is effectively the same show with different situations. With the same characters with different shapes.
Don't forget that Prickleberry literally has an FB police version, which literally same characters.
So, this is legally publishing your fanfiction. I want to point this out. Ah, God, I am stuck to the chair and I need to figure out why.
Super glue.
There we go.
That's not been very strong super glue.
So, this was ruled not legal. This was ruled legal. This was ruled legal. This was ruled legal. Do you guys understand the difference, or do you have questions? Ask away. I've got 10 minutes.
What's the Air Pirates one?
The Air Pirates one is where someone took Mickey and Minnie Mouse and threw them into horrible, horrible situations without Disney's permission, such as where they're literally performing kidnappings, bank robberies, actual murder in the desert, and smuggling crack across the Mexican border. And Disney said, no, you're not allowed to do that. And it was determined that because no characterization change had been made, and no character design change had been made either, it wasn't transformative enough. Yes?
Thank you for explaining the law and all this to me. Now I know for a fact, like 100%, that I'm way outside being in that legal problem. Because I basically have something that is 100% characters or world.
For instance, in my own work, throughout the entire work, I have actual Pinkie Pie presents. Doesn't, disembodied ghost, but it's still Pinkie Pie. But it's Fallout Equestria's Pinkie Pie, who's like, you should murder them. Or, who wants to throw parties with explosions?
Oh, that's super
And
cool.
the main character has to be like, no, that's not okay. We should not do this.
I undecided.
I mean, it's cool.
So you mentioned earlier, if you publish something online and it doesn't, if that Hasbro team doesn't go after you for 4 years, you're free to publish it anywhere else, right?
Pretty much, it should be considered that they have seen.
Right outside.
So,
Like when I showed up to BronyCon in 2019 with books sitting there, and there was even a BronyCon library. And Hasbro has reps at these cons, watching their VIPs, or they did before they ended the G4 show, watching those VIPs to make sure they don't spill anything, to make sure they don't say anything they're not supposed to make sure that they are representing their brand, that kind of thing. Like Hasbro hasn't had a rep show up to BabsCon every year to deliver the episode on a physical disc, so that it could be played Saturday morning before the episode came out.
what
So they
constitutes,
know this stuff is going on, and if they don't do anything about it, that's on them.
what constitutes publishing though? Is
It has to
uploading
be
a text
available
file?
publicly in a public format and easily searchable via at least 5 keywords.
5 keywords easily searchable, okay.
So like for me, if you type in dead tree and pony, I come up. If you type in wandering sunrise, pony, it comes up.
Gotcha.
What is that?
I can show you this right now.
Is there a term for that, or like a category of law that is, or anything like that?
Under copyright law, it is the term of brand recognition. Your brand has to be recognizable by searching 5 or less keywords at any time in order to search that brand, and you have to have at least 5 different combinations to show
For Pokemon,
different
I
words.
just.
So for instance, if I bring this over here and I type in Wandering Sunrise Pond, and I go over here to images,
Seriously, that's kind of the point. It's fine.
Done.
For Pokemon, sorry.
Yeah. And then I like animal.
then if I type Fallout Dead Tree,
You know what? When I got
no
newly
argument.
Fauna, your girl was in my.
That is also your personal,
I've never
is
played
that your
with
personal
her,
laptop?
And I see her in my town.
Yeah, that's my personal laptop, we're in, we're live in already.
And I had her in my county.
Yeah, couldn't quite see that from here, so.
Let's switch to an incognito thing. Private window.
Well, I found her.
Same search.
I found her
Yep.
in my town and I kept her for a year.
Same
and a
result.
half.
It's not that I didn't believe you, it's just that it's a
And I
potential
was
issue.
I don't know what any of this is. I think that's.
That's your figurine.
It says Shapeways, I'm assuming that's a 3D model.
Yeah, that's your figurine. That's literally the figurine you
Okay,
have at
that's a
home.
figurine. Okay, that somebody made. That you made. Okay, you got it. Yeah, that's literally what it is you have to be able to come up with terms that are 5 words or less that you can search repeatedly and find your brand. Yes,
Billy Fantasia.
not happening.
Is it or is it not though?
Billy Fantasia is legally transformative because it takes completely different characters and uses different technology to create their sprites.
Alright.
So because the characterization and the physical representation, that is to say how they look, is completely different, legally, yes, it's transformative.
Actually, I didn't.
Is the actual story transformative? No.
I didn't know this off the top of my head, but if you Google it, I believe Hasbro has sued the Billy Fantasia company.
Yes, they have.
So they might have changed some stuff around since then.
Press down. Let's try this again.
It's on Wikipedia for Twitter.
Technically, it's still legal, even if they've sued them.
Cool.
Because if it wasn't still legal, it'd be taken down off of IMDb immediately because it's one of their policies.
Have you seen that huge
It's a
one?
knockoff, but
Wait, what's a knockoff?
like, it's a knockoff, but it's a legal knockoff.
Have you seen that huge lawsuit where whoever originally created some of the SU stuff is trying to sue Marvel for the rights?
Yes. And in my opinion, they own the right, the person who was suing should get the right because they created it. A lot of what Stan Lee did was tear original works from creators and claim them as their own. He didn't create Spider-Man. He did not create the X-Men. He did not create Fantastic Four, yet his name appears underneath it.
Something about, yes, making a fanfiction.
He never wrote a single comic. Did he do great wonderful things? There was a time.
little bit.
But that time was long past by the time that he'd already turned the company over to someone else.
The music starts, I gotta tell you already.
Any other questions? I have like 2 minutes. Yes.
So Hasbro will or could potentially go after you simply for making a story about cartoon talking horses.
Yes, but that ship's already sailed with the legal signing of the deal.
Okay. Because I've had an idea kicking around in my head for a while for a comic I wanted to make where, but it's not an Equestria, all the characters are original. I came up with my own art style that has ponies that don't have cutie marks and I think look fairly distinct from official My Little Ponies, but I was thinking, could they still go after me though?
Maybe. Again, it's a thing where everything is fluid until you solidify it. Till I had my copyright number and ISBN numbers and had a legally signed document, everything was up in the air. And I was taking a huge roll of the dice that I probably had no right to take, and I acknowledge that. But at the same time, I was tired of being told, no, you're not allowed to do this. And decided, no, you know what, I am allowed to do this, and you're gonna prove to me why I'm not. And they couldn't. They actually couldn't. And it's the biggest, scariest thing for big companies is the fact that if someone challenges them on their copyrights that they claim and is willing to fight it out, they know they will lose. If someone created like a pair of circular ears that were black and put them on a character and Disney tried to claim it, and you fought them, Disney would lose. Because all you have to do is prove that's not Mickey Mouse. That's all you have to do. So keep that in mind, but also keep in mind that you get one shot. You better make sure it's a damn good one. And you better make sure with more than one lawyer, because I went to 4 separate lawyers before I was willing to go forward. And all 4 of them agreed, yes, you have a case and you will probably win. It will be long, drawn out, and bloody. It was 5 months where I had to go to court every week, at least once a week, all day. If I had a regular day job, I would have been fired. Because no one has that much all time in the United States. And some weeks I had to go three times in a week. The judge got so sick of seeing me in the same dresses, he simply asked, Ms. Miller, do you have something else you can wear? Because I can't keep up with the days of the week anymore, I see you so often. I told him I had a lab coat, and he didn't believe me. So I came in this thing and sat down, and he looked at me and he smiled. And my lawyer leans over and goes, he never smiles. Is that a good or a bad thing? I don't know, he doesn't smile. So the entire court case was just upended because the judge cracked a smile. The next week we knew we'd won, it was just a matter of how well we'd won. And then a month later it was Hasbro going, let's cut a deal, what do you want? And then Hasbro finding out I didn't want money, which baffled their lawyers. Anyway, so yeah, that's the end of this panel.